and she owns Healthy House Chicago and helps families assess the levels of EMF radiation in their home. She grew up in Lake Forest, Illinois, and has a bachelor's degree in molecular biophysics and biochemistry from Yale University. Mieke also trained with Building Biology Institute, a registered CEU provider that offers the only accredited EMF training program in North America. Mieke has a remarkable story of healing and has used her experience and expertise to help so many others. Welcome, Mieke.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. We're really interested in your story. Could you tell us a little bit about how you became interested in EMF?
I had always been interested in health, and for a long time, I wasn't really sure, and maybe that won't be as hard as working 40 hours a week somewhere. And unfortunately, because I was at Yale, I decided to get a job in New York City because that's where everybody from Yale went. And that turned out to be a very bad decision. And because right away, as soon as I was there, I just kept going downhill. I was getting sicker, and eventually just within that first year I was no longer even able to make it to the job anymore. And I didn't know why. I thought that I just had some sort of illness and that it was just a progression of an illness. I didn't really know what it was. And so I tried to work part-time, and then eventually I had to go back to my parents back in Illinois. And at that point I had to be in a wheelchair at the airplane just to get me through the terminal. I was
Wow.
pretty much in bed probably 23 hours a day. And when I was in bed, I wasn't in pain or anything like that. It was only if I sat up or tried to do things that my heart rate would go very high. And I had seen all different doctors. I had been to holistic practitioners, and I was also very much into eating organic food, and none of that really made a difference, unfortunately.
Mhm.
And at that point, I really didn't know what to do. And eventually, after going back to my parents, I did stop getting worse. Then a few years later, I did have improvement, and I didn't really know. It was so hard to tell. Was it the no wheat or the no dairy? Was there some sort of diet? Because I was trying every different thing. And or was it acupuncture? I was seeing a lot of different practitioners, and so I really didn't know what it was. Then at some point things actually got a lot worse. I was having different strange symptoms, and I couldn't digest food anymore. And finally, it was only after a number of years that I was starting to have ear ringing. And so then I started Googling that, and I came upon the information that it had to do with EMFs and
Mhm.
electromagnetic fields. And I had heard about it a little bit over the years. Of course, yeah, that makes sense. A cell phone would not be good to talk on. I'd heard different things here and there, but at that moment, I realized, like, oh my gosh. And I went through and did a deep dive, and I basically at that point made the correlation that I started having all of these symptoms when my parents had eventually sold my childhood home. And then within 24 hours, I could not digest my food. I was shivering cold. I couldn't go outside. It was the middle of the winter. And then after about a year, we were in a rental. We moved to a different rental. And then those two symptoms went away. But then I had memory loss. Like I would walk from one room to the next room, and I couldn't remember where I had been. And then looking back, I realized that I had been in pretty good health in my childhood home. It was only when I had moved to the East Coast for college, and then to New York City, that I had all these different problems. And I realized that likely there were issues with the different college dorms that I was in. And then definitely with living in New York City, eventually I came to the piece of information that all the power lines in New York City were buried under the south side of the east-west street. And there I was in a ground floor apartment. So the levels I was experiencing would have been probably 10 times average, if not more, of that particular type of field. And so I was very much able to see the correlation between the different places I had lived. And it was only because of my childhood home, which I realized must have been just the most unimaginably low EMF home ever, that I had this memory of being well in a place. And even when I was very sick, I did not feel like any sorts of adverse effects, but it took me a while because with EMFs and with health in general, it's not just one thing, it's a general picture. So even when I returned back home, even though I returned to a low EMF environment, my body was still in a state of disarray. And so it was only after doing extreme diet and other interventions that I started to improve. And so then when we sold that home and I moved somewhere else, I didn't go all the way back down to being bedridden like I had before because I was doing so much for my health, but something was throwing me off. And I had been taking a lot of supplements, and I never had success with supplements, but all of a sudden when we moved, I was throwing them up. My body was like, no, no supplements, no personal care products. I couldn't even put on sunscreen. So I knew something had changed, that my body was no longer able to tolerate the slightest thing. And I do want to point out that this wasn't the only piece of the picture. I also, at some point, had done different DNA testing. And so I saw that I was missing the pieces of genes where I couldn't really detox. And so it's basically a holistic picture with health. I know
Mm-hmm.
there's different genetic predispositions. There's the reduction of toxins from food and from products and everything else in the environment. And then there are the EMFs. And of course, there's stress and other things too. We can't really change our genes, and then the stress is hard to control. And most people are already getting rid of the toxins and eating healthy. So EMF is really, like, for many people, the last thing. Like, this is the
Right.
last thing that we can tackle and that we do have a lot of control over. And
Right.
yeah, I know a lot of people, they're really saying EMFs are everywhere. And actually, you can do a lot. Every different homes, the levels vary 100 to 1,000 times, and so you can really do a lot to influence that. And in some extreme cases, people do have to move. But even in any home, like, there might be 5 things wrong, you could probably fix 3 or 4 of them and really make a huge impact on your health.
Mm-hmm. Is there some type of machine or evaluator for EMF levels that people can purchase? And what would be the normal level for a home?
Oh, that's a great question. So when I'm doing a test, I have 10 to 20 different professional meters because there's a whole bunch of different types of EMFs. And even within each type of EMF, there are different ranges. So I usually have a couple meters for each time. But for all of my clients, I always do recommend it's good to have 1 or 2 meters to keep track of the levels over time. And so depending at the appointment, I might decide you might want to buy this one or you might want to buy that one. And especially if someone's looking to purchase a new home, when I'm working with clients like that, I am generally also making meter recommendations. And so for someone who's listening and wants to empower themselves and learn, because that is very important, and not to freak out, oh, they're not going to be able to get everything unless they have professional assessment. You can still learn a lot with 1 meter. The Tri-Field TF2 meter, that's a really great basic meter. It's about $150. That one is a really good meter in terms of being able to test the magnetic fields. The electric fields, it really doesn't pick up very well. You really do need a professional meter for that. But if someone's looking for a new home, they're really going to be more concerned about the magnetic and about the radio frequency. And it does test radio frequency as well. Again, not super well, but it'll pick up really strong sources like a Wi-Fi router or really close cell phone tower. But yeah, if someone is very electrically sensitive, and it really, for someone like that, it does make a lot of sense to have a professional mitigation, because the types of problems, there's usually multiple different issues in the home. And once someone has gotten sick, they really need those levels to be brought lower than your average person who's listening. And they're concerned basically, about future preventative health, or especially for their children. That's one of the other things I do, is I work with families to set up like a low tech, safe tech household, because we do need technology. I'm not telling everyone to dump their phone and iPad in the garbage can, but just to basically work within like today's world, but in as safe a way as possible.
I was teaching yoga, and a lot of times people ask me my opinion about different health issues. And this man said, I have all this ear ringing and tinnitus. And I went to my doctor, and he said, you're just going to have to live with it. It's no cure. And I looked at
God.
him and I said, there is a cure for everything. I can promise you that. At the time, I wasn't really sure, but I started doing some research, and I immediately found that it was related to EMF. And it's just amazing that our medical professions don't consider that.
I know, especially, yeah, tinnitus, ear ringing is the symptom with the strongest correlation to EMFs, because a few decades ago, it was very rare. People only had that if either A, they had some sort of congenital hearing malformation, or B, if they had a profession or a hobby such as jackhammering or music, where they were exposed to lots of loud noises over many years. And those people do, of course, get tinnitus. or see as a medication side effect. And so
Mhm.
now we're seeing those three are accounting for maybe 1% of cases. The other 99% of cases are from overexposure to EMFs. And so really primarily radio frequency, but if the background levels in someone's home are high, they're going to be more predisposed as well because everyone is using cell phones. Everyone's using this technology, but only some people are being affected. And
Mhm.
it's almost always that the levels in the home that they are living in are contributing to that. So while it's important to get rid of as much as you can, sometimes that's not enough because I have seen a lot of people make that mistake. Oh my God, it's my phone. My phone is killing me. Phones are bad. No one else around me can use a phone and blah, blah. And really, they haven't dug deeper and looked into why am I reacting so much more to everyone else than everyone else is to their phone? Are they using it more? Usually they aren't. Is their phone defective? Yeah, that could be possible, but it's rare. And so really digging in deep because it is a cumulative effect.
Mhm.
Basically, all of these different levels of EMFs, they are adding in, and then eventually one day it boils over, and then people start to experience symptoms. So it has to do with what's in their home, what's in their workplace, the different devices they're using, and also their lifetime load. Like when I have a couple where two of them are there sleeping in the same bed, and one of them is feeling worse than the other, as part of my intake questionnaire, I'll go through where all they had lived, and that one maybe was living by an airport and getting hit by airport radar for 20 years, and the other one maybe
Wow.
lived somewhere else.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's really important.
Right. Gosh, that sounds scary. Why did they increase the phones from 3G to 5G? That sounded like a crazy move to me.
Oh yeah, I guess it went technically from 3 to 4 to 5.
Oh.
And yeah, part of it really was having to do with just the bandwidth. Unfortunately, people are just using their phones for everything. And I think if we had the responsible way of doing things, people, and what I do and what I encourage my clients to do is to do as much of your usage of data at home on your home computer. Even if you're using Wi-Fi, it's still going through your Wi-Fi router. But if you're using data and you're walking around all day downloading videos and everything, like that's where we're having this demand for more information from the towers. And then also within your phone itself, if people are wanting to do that, like download their videos from their phone or things like that, there's more that is going to be needed from the phone. But there unfortunately are a lot of people out there who still don't do much and they want to have the older phone. But eventually there's so many things also, like all the apps on the phone, like
Hmm.
there's just so much more need for data. You can hook up your phone via Ethernet. And so I do that, but the older phones weren't workable for that. There wouldn't be enough room on it. And
I
so
see.
then in terms of the 3G, 4G, 5G, there's just, like I said, there's just so much more data. And they're not, I guess they don't want to have to support all of this. So they are not, that's why they're closing down some of these older Gs.
Vertigo, is that related to EMS?
Yes, yes. And so
Oh,
that is
wow.
one of the strongest ones as well. Like I would say the ear ringing is the most common, but vertigo, again, that's something that was pretty rare. So
Very.
now people are getting that if they have the high radio frequency exposure. Atrial fibrillation and brain tumor, there is definitely a very high correlation for radio frequency, whereas for magnetic fields, which is a different type of EMF, there we're seeing other things like a lot of chronic fatigue and adrenal stress, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
Increased risk for other cancers. So, yeah, when people are getting different health issues, really that's the most important thing to look into because it seems like maybe 5% of health issues are genetically related. So a lot of this is really coming from stuff in the environment. And a lot of people, they're already knowing about the diet. They're already doing these other things, getting rid of the toxins. I think people are pretty much aware of that. But
Hmm.
with the EMFs, people really are not aware of how much of an impact that can be having.
No, I know. How can you tell if a home has low EMF or high EMF? What are some of the factors EMF wise when we consider to build?
Basically, there's 4 different types of EMFs that are commonly found in residential homes. There's the AC, stands for alternating current. There's AC magnetic. There's AC electric. there's radio frequency, and there's dirty electricity. And so
Hmm.
the first two, the magnetic and the electric, they've been around for 100 plus years since we've had electricity. And it's the second two that have been increasing in recent years and recent decades. And so the radio frequency has to do with everything wireless. And so that basically cell phone tower, any sorts of smart home devices, airport radar, cordless phones. There's a ton of sources. So that's, as you can imagine, been going up. That's the thing that's been changing the most.
Hmm.
And then the fourth one is dirty electricity, which are basically like high frequency transients that ride along the home's wiring. And so the main sources of those are actually energy efficient, whether it's appliances, lighting, solar panels, and then also everything that we're using, computers, electronic equipment, anything where we're charging all of those devices. And
Hmm.
so yeah, the problem is that a lot of homes that were built before more than 60 years ago, they weren't built grounded. And so people that are living in those homes, they were only built for using having a refrigerator and some lights and everything like that. So then if people are now working on their computers there, it's a very different story. A lot of people are having problems. So a home that might not have caused problems 50 years ago, that same home is going to be causing more problems because people are bringing all of their stuff into that home.
Hmm.
And so that's just something I think a lot of people aren't really taking into consideration.
So it's better to buy a newer home?
Yeah, and so actually the age of the home electrically is equivalent to the age of the electrical installation. So if you had some home that was this gorgeous home from the 1920s or whatever, if
Hmm.
the electric was basically stripped and started from scratch in 95 or in 2010 or
Hmm.
whenever, then your home electrically is that age. So as long as it was totally redone, that's totally not a problem. The
Hmm.
issue is a lot of people, they do it piecemeal and then they don't do it correctly.
Hmm.
And so they maybe like they're thinking that they're upgrading it correctly and they're not. Or even some things when they are done to code, there are different ways, especially for people who are electrically sensitive, that the code can be interpreted for it to be done differently. Because I know a lot of people are like, okay, like what do I do? What do I need to? I'll just call an electrician. And they don't realize
Hmm.
you really do need to have an EMF consultant to give guidance on what to tell your electrician. Because if you call the electrician, they're not going to know. They're not going to know anything about EMFs. They're just going to say, hey, as long as the light turns on, it's fine. They're not going to realize that there's four different wiring errors that are NEC code violations that can cause it. There's a lot of different errors that can occur, but some of them don't lead to an increase in magnetic fields. The other ones do. And so that can be the problem. That's where it gets tricky.
Wow. So all of this is news to me.
Yeah. And to me, too, I would never have known any of this either.
Oh my goodness. So, what problems do some homes have that make it really difficult to get rid of?
Okay, so we've already touched on the fact if the home is older,
Right.
or even like I said, some homes could be newer, but if you had a shoddy contractor or even like a builder, that can be problematic because sometimes a lot of home builders, they want to cut costs, right? So they will skimp on the wiring and share different wires, and you're not supposed to do that. Now, everything will still work, but they won't realize that they've caused high EMFs doing this. Also, a lot of
Oh.
problems I've seen when people are remodeling a home or even just fixing a light or whatever, there'll be one little problem. And I'm like, that's weird. All of these lights are fine, but this one isn't. Oh, that's the one that I did myself. Or else, like Uncle Joe, of the previous owner's Uncle Joe, refinished the basement. No one pulled any permit. And so that can really lead to problems as well. So when I am in my intake form for new clients, those are some of the questions that I ask. What sort of remodeling has taken place? Is the home still its original footprint, or has it been added on to? Because that can also lead to problems as well. Not always. A lot of homes are updated. It's fine, but you just never know.
Right. Well, what symptoms do people get that they don't realize are related to EMF? You've touched on a couple of them, but
Yeah. Okay, and headaches is a big one, like a
mhm,
kind of a stabbing pain headache. Headaches, it's hard because there are so many causes of headaches. Some people get them when they are detoxing, or sometimes they'll get them from mold or from chemicals, but they
mhm,
are very distinct. And so a lot of people who get headaches, they can tell this is an EMF headache versus a mold headache versus a detox headache, but it does take someone very sensitive to discern. But yeah, if
mhm,
someone is getting headaches, a lot of that is related to the wireless and also being in the higher EMF home with the higher background levels. and then the wireless on top of that, because like I said, everyone's using wireless. A lot of people aren't getting headaches. Head pressure, so not just the headache, but people who feel like their head's about to explode, or they feel this pressure in their ears,
Mm-hmm.
that unusual pressure in different parts of their body, that is very strongly related to EMFs. Chest pain, muscle twitching or weakness, or other sorts of muscle dysfunction where there's just no known cause, like there's nothing that would be leading it to. So with any of these symptoms, it's something where we just don't have a cause. Like a lot of people, unexplained anxiety or depression, they will get different mental health problems, but usually they can trace it to something that happened in their life, or there could be some
Mm-hmm.
other things that they know it's related to.
Mm-hmm.
Tingling or vibrations in the body, that's another big one.
Mm-hmm.
And because I think there's a misconception where people are like, oh, EMFs don't affect me, because they think it's just the tingling or the vibrations or something like that. And so when
Mm-hmm.
they're not feeling that, then they think, oh, I'm not allergic to EMFs. They don't realize that all the other symptoms are related to EMFs.
Mm-hmm.
So that one, I think, with the tingling and vibrations, I think people are quick to know if they have that particular symptom that it is EMF. Or like tremors. Like it used to be, you very rarely saw anyone with Parkinson's or with tremors. I'm seeing it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's the whole body, sometimes it's just their arm.
Yeah.
And that's something that is definitely very new. Food allergies. Of course, people are thinking, oh, it's the food supply, and oh, it's this and it's that. We've had bad food and toxins since the 50s. When people, the baby boomers, they were all exposed to all these chemicals. They were not getting this. But when you have these high levels of these EMFs in someone's home, it can be leading to a breach in the blood-brain barrier. And so these different particles of food, they can cross the barrier, and then that is what is causing these problems. So it's not so much the food itself, it's that now the food or the chemicals or whatever has a way to get in there. Because a lot of people weren't realizing with multiple chemical sensitivity, people are really only getting that if they're in a high EMF home. There's chemicals everywhere, but people are really only having that. And it used to be rare. There weren't many people who got that in the 70s and 80s, maybe only if they were by radio tower or something, but now it's become so much more common. And then dysautonomia, again, that was something that was actually the diagnosis that I had originally received a couple decades ago, and I had never heard of it then, but now so many kids, their heart rate is too high, or else the blood pressure, there's a difference between the systolic and diastolic gap, or it's
Mm-hmm.
just changing around all the time. And so that really is a big correlation. And then also light sensitivity, noise sensitivity. People think that has to do with the light or the noise, but I've seen a lot of times where once you mitigate the EMFs, then you're no longer sensitive. When I had done different EMF mitigation, it didn't bother me anymore then. The room did not need to be totally dark. The slightest little noise would not wake me up, even though I had earplugs in. And so that's
Wow.
definitely something. Tactile sensitivity. So all these different sensitivities. Eczema, that also was very rare until we had this whole rollout of Wi-Fi and smartphones and everything
Mm-hmm.
15, 20 years ago. No one had eczema then.
Right.
And yeah, concentration, memory loss, that is very much also related to wireless. And I think just there's a lot of other like unexplained nightmares or nosebleeds. These ones aren't as common, but I've definitely, when I was growing up, people only got nosebleeds if they were in a fight in the schoolyard and someone punched them.
Right.
Now I hear stories like the Wi-Fi has gotten so high, kids are getting nosebleeds all the time. As I've been doing this longer, I have started to really, because those are the ones that I was noticing right away, but now I'm noticing more osteoporosis and any sort of bone density decrease. I'm seeing a lot of people that are having these problems, and some of them are younger people where they're like hunched over their phone. It has to do with usage, but a lot of other people who are older who aren't on their phone all the time, I've seen that, and they've noticed this too, where people will have to get a hip replacement, and the hip that the phone was being carried on, it has like way less bone density than the other hip. And in just different people where they're living in a high EMF situation, I am seeing that a lot. And then also, like I said, the mental symptoms as well, or any sort of unusual combination of symptoms that the doctor hasn't seen. Because it used to be people went to the doctor, they were getting regular diagnoses. Oh, you have diabetes. Oh, you have heart disease. And now it's like there's just this crazy, we're not sure what you have. I think I heard it wasn't really one illness. It was like 16 different illnesses. And I was just basically wanted to touch on first all of the different symptoms
Right.
that I have seen, or unexplained back pain, or actually even hernia. I have seen that a lot where people like that used to be pretty rare. Now people are getting it. Were you lifting something? Was there something that caused this? And they are getting that when they are in high EMF homes as well.
Wow. So I guess it's really bad idea to work with your computer on your stomach.
Yeah, definitely. I always tell everyone you want to have at least a foot in between it, and that's
Mhm.
even if you're doing it like via Ethernet. There still are a lot of other frequencies on the computer as well,
Mhm.
and so I encourage people to set up, just for ergonomic reasons as well, a workstation where you are sitting at a desk and you have it like raised up, and then you have a separate keyboard and mouse and everything like that. So yeah, sitting there with it. Yeah, because I know there was one time there's someone I had heard of who was very ill, and it showed a picture. There was a story, and it was like resting on their chest, their computer. And I
Oh
thought, gosh,
God.
he's not going to be getting better. Yeah, it's hard if you try to reach out to people in the chronic fatigue community. No one really responds. So
They don't realize their connection.
yeah.
So, do you have any easy tips on lowering our exposure to EMF for people that might not be able to redo all their electrical work?
Yeah, yeah, and actually, like a lot of people really don't need to do much. And I personally, because after years of illness, I'm not in the position to own a home, and so I am renting. So I haven't been able to do any electrical work myself either. And I've still gone from being bedridden to being up and about and running a business 60 plus hours a week. So that isn't something that people do need to do. But
Mhm.
I was at one point in an older home, and there were problems, and eventually the problems, I was having to leave it at some point because I wasn't going to be able to fix them. But yeah,
Mhm.
for most people, the biggest source above and beyond is your phone, your cell phone. And
Mhm.
so I do encourage people with the cell phone, there's a lot you can do to reduce what is coming out. If you go into the settings menu, you'll see, if you look at all the antennas, if you go there to Wi-Fi, you'll see that's on. You actually don't need Wi-Fi to make a call. You can just turn that off.
Oh.
And yeah, because otherwise, if you leave your home and then you're somewhere else, you might think the Wi-Fi is off, and it won't say off. It will say not connected. So when it says that not connected, it's constantly searching for different things, because the problem is that then when you're in your home and you have the Wi-Fi on, it's always outputting. And if you need to turn on Wi-Fi for a brief bit for something, are you going to remember to turn it off? I certainly am not. It'll happen at the end of the day. I look down, oh no, and I see not connected because I had turned it on briefly for whatever reason, and then I had forgotten to turn it off. That's actually the biggest reason I encourage people to have it off,
Mhm.
is that you're not using it all that time, but yet it is still pumping out. Whereas if you have the Wi-Fi off, that's one less layer of radiation that you are being hit by. Same for the Bluetooth. For Bluetooth, most people, it's on. They do not realize that their phone has been pumping out Bluetooth all the time. And really,
Oh.
unless someone's using it when they're in the car for directions or whatever, the
Mhm.
rest of the time it's again pumping out. So I encourage people to turn that off as well. Hotspot, some people are using their phone as a hot. That's like a third layer that is going on all the time. And then some of the lesser antennas, like Find My Phone, that's another one. And at this point, we're starting to get into the nitty gritty because there's different rules for different phones. So I'll just basically give an overview. But it's even hard to predict when I'm talking with clients, unless I'm there with their phone and checking all this, how much each antenna is really putting out. But what I'm giving is just basically a basic overview that will be helpful no matter what. But it's hard
Mhm.
to say for sure which of these things is really impacting them the most. Yeah, so basically the Find My Phone, and then location services. That's another one that you really don't need to have on. I would just turn it on if, say, I'm out and I need directions. But when you're in your home, you really don't need the location services on as well, too.
Mhm.
And so then that just leaves us with cellular data. And so if you go into the cellular data menu, you'll see that there's, gosh, most people probably have 60 apps on their phone, and they're only maybe using 5 of them. So if you go through all of those apps and turn off the cellular data for all but the 5 that you use, then that way your phone is outputting a lot less, because otherwise all those apps, they're constantly searching and downloading and everything like that. So if you turn all of those off, they're not doing that. And then with the cellular data itself, if you're just waiting for a phone call, you can have the cellular data off as well, because you really don't need the cellular data to make a
Mhm.
phone call either. So you can have the phone across the room where it's not close to you. And then when you get a call, because a lot of us, we do need our phones to run our business, or people are awaiting texts and that sort of thing. Now, with cellular data, again, whether texts can come through or not, that's going to depend on your carrier. I know for me at different times, Sometimes only other T-Mobile customers text came through. Sometimes everyone text
Hmm.
came through, which is happening now. And then sometimes, but the text, if there's a picture, it won't come through. So if the picture is part of the text, I won't get the text. And if it's part of a group text. So when I go every once in a while to turn on the data, then those other texts will download. That's another thing to take into consideration. But for most people, they don't need to be that connected to everyone all the time.
Hmm.
And particularly if you have the phone on you, all of these things are going off all the time.
Hmm.
So it's good to have most of these cellular data apps off and then just like those four or five
Hmm.
outputting, if that makes sense.
So you're also saying, really, living in cities, you're just being overloaded with the EMF radiation, and that living out in the country is a lot easier because you don't have as much concentration, correct?
Yeah, so on average, the levels are higher in the city
Hmm.
for magnetic and for radio frequency, the two levels that people would be taking into account when they're looking to purchase a home. But that's just on average. You could certainly have a home that's nowhere near as bad as most of them in Chicago, where I do testing. Or you could, I've seen this a number of times. People are like, oh, the EMFs are terrible in Chicago. I'm going to move out to the country. And they think that's enough, getting a single family home further out. And you could have walked into another minefield. Like someone could be putting a solar farm next to you. There could
Right.
be so many different things that could happen. And so a lot of times when I'm working with clients on how to purchase a new home or to purchase land to build a new home, that's really the most important step. I'll go through, they'll tell me their target area, like whether it's, and I do this nationwide, not just for people in the Chicago area, maybe these certain suburbs in New Jersey we're looking in, or this part of Tennessee we're looking in, and I'll research it ahead of time. I'll look out for the different minefields in that area. And because a lot of it can be due to the area, but then a lot of it is also due to the home. So I'll go through different things to look for. So when a client's working with me to look for a new home, first I'll go through the tips to narrow down your search. Because even like just time-wise, who has the time to drive out to every single home they see in the internet? So different things that you're going to narrow it down. Okay, these aren't homes you want to see. Which homes do you want to then? Then they'll get to a home where they decide they're going to go drive by. And so then I'll give them ideas of what they're going to be looking for during that drive-by. And then
Hmm.
if the home passes that test, then at that point they're going to be calling in the agent to give them a tour, because you're going to lose your realtor really fast if you bring them out to every single home. You really want to narrow down which homes you're actually bringing your realtor out to.
Right.
And then at that point, if passes that next test, different things they're looking for during the inside test, then they will call me out either as a condition of the contract, or maybe they'll have me out before they go under contract. It's really pretty complicated nowadays because a lot of people, they might not let someone in to do this testing unless they're under contract, or else the homeowner's still living there, so we're limited in what we can do during the test. So it
Hmm.
really depends on a case-by-case situation. But yeah, if someone's about to buy a home, I've seen so many people like, oh, I'm just going to move out there. I'm not going to get an EMF consultant. I'm just going to buy this. Or they're really fixed on this one thing. I'm going to avoid like X. And then
Right.
they like walk into Y and Z, and they don't realize that there really are like 10 to 20 different factors you want to take into account. If you're someone who's sensitive, for the average person, it does take a pretty high load of EMF to make someone sick. But once you're already having any of these symptoms that I mentioned, in order for your body to heal, you're really going to want to be choosing a lower EMF.
So clearly, when you're sleeping, you should have your phone on airplane mode
Yes, and that's
only.
the biggest problem I see in terms of is that people are charging their phones next to their beds. So
Oh,
that's
I see it
something,
all the time, and no one believes me when when I
because
sound like
the
a
problem is,
broken record.
yeah, there's four different types of EMF. You've got basically the phone, it's outputting radio frequency all the time, unless you have like the whole thing, all the antennas turned off.
Hmm.
And then also just the electric field from the cord. And then, if you're in close proximity, there's other dirty electricity kind of frequencies coming off of it. And yeah, so people really, there's a lot of different things that can be, that make that like probably the worst source for any home. So yeah, in terms of just easy things that people can do, all the stuff I mentioned with the phone, and then not having the phone charged next to your bed. But yeah, I think after that is where it gets tricky, because I've just run across so many people who are like, I don't have any EMFs in my bedroom because my phone is off, and they
Yeah.
have no idea. Gosh, stuff could be coming from the wiring of your home, stuff from your neighbor's homes that you share the transformer with, that could be coming into the home. There could be stuff from the neighboring cellular grid, other items within your home. It's really very difficult to figure out. And it's interesting because when I first heard about EMFs, when I came to realize it, I had talked to someone who had come to inspect my New York City apartment. That's how I first heard about this whole profession of building biology. So I called her back a number of years later. I'm like, we just moved. We sold my childhood home and we're somewhere else. I'm not feeling well. And I saw this book and it said that EMFs could be a problem. It said the rest of the book, it was like cleanliness and all these other things, which I knew weren't the issue. And I thought maybe it's this EMF thing. And I remembered when she had been there, she had mentioned a little bit about EMFs when she had been to my New York City apartment and told me that I, really needed to move. At that point, I don't believe in regards to EMFs. It was more that there was a problem where there was like a carbon monoxide leak, and then there just wasn't there were a lot of other issues. So when she was telling me I had to leave, EMFs were not mentioned as part of that. But I did remember she touched on it, so that I had reached back out to her to ask her that. So at that point, I think she told me about a meter, and so I bought a meter. And then I checked and I thought, oh, this is okay. It's not it. And it wouldn't be for another couple of years that I realized, oh, there were a couple other different types of fields as well. Because at that time, I remember looking at her website, she only had mention of this one type of EMF. And then by the time she had updated it to include all the other types, that was a couple of years later. So even she wouldn't have known. She might have just been aware of the one type of EMF, not the other types. So then also the levels, too, that people have thought were safe. A lot of people are buying meters off the internet. And the meter, what comes with the meter will say this level is safe, and that's not the safe level. In terms of me working with clients, and even within the building biology profession, the levels that they have said were safe have been going down over time. In 2008, when I first heard about it, they said this level is safe. Then in 2012, now we're thinking it's this level. Then I had other colleagues tell me, actually, for someone like you who's really sensitive, you really need this level. And so it's not like there's even one specific number. So with different clients, that's why I'm also doing a health history to figure out what levels would be good for this person.
Right, because some people would be more sensitive to it than others. But over time, I think everyone would be affected by it if you are in it long enough. You were talking about in apartment buildings how you were in a first floor apartment building that was really overloaded. Are first floor apartments generally ones you avoid, or is there a reason why they are more affected?
Yeah. And so the first floor apartment is going to be much worse if you are in either New York City or the downtown of another city where all the power lines are underground. But in most cities, the power lines are above ground. So that would not be the case. It was just for New York City that is the case that I had heard that most of New York City, because it's like such a evenly laid out grid, and I have not unfortunately been back there to measure since then to verify this, but I had heard from another colleague that basically once you get up to the fourth or fifth floor is where it's low enough. But of course then you got all these other levels. New York City obviously has the highest EMFs of anywhere in the country. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if someone is living in New York City, do not live on those lower floors. Once there's so many different factors that go into it, because some high-rise buildings are really well wired. So this could be the case. It's really like a case-by-case scenario. Like I know I was talking to someone who was part of a Lyme support group, and she mentioned that she had healed from Lyme in New York City. And I said to her, this must have been at least 20 years ago, and you must have been on a high floor. She's like, how'd you know? I'm like, I know you can't heal on a low floor. And then 20 years ago, there wouldn't have been Wi-Fi everywhere. So yeah, it could have been possible to heal from a moldy Lyme house there in New York City. But it was funny because I knew right away when she said she healed there, it had to have been a long time ago, and it had to have been in a certain spot.
Wow, that's fascinating. So how do you create low EMF sleep sanctuaries so your body can rest and repair itself at night? Like sleep is so important, and I would think EMF would wake people up a lot.
Yeah, so when I am going through and testing a home, I've got the 20 different meters and I'm checking for all the different levels. And so depending what levels are high, then there's going to be different mitigations for those. And so some of the mitigations I can do while I'm there. Some, like I said, some of them, if you have an older home, I would be giving instructions for an electrician to do things. Sometimes it's coming externally. Like sometimes people need to make requests of the utility. Sometimes people need to buy different items for shielding. And so really there's no one thing. And so that's like my biggest frustration with what happens with a lot of people is that they're just looking for a product and they don't realize every home has different levels. So you can't just buy X or Y or Z off of the internet. I've gone through what I think are the things everyone should be doing, not charging the phone next to the bed, making your cell phone less. But yeah, unfortunately, it's different. Like I know in particular, the Chicago area has a different NEC, National Electric Code, than the rest of the country. And so there have been issues where people have had a consultant who didn't live in the Chicago area test their home, and they ran up a big bill testing things that didn't need to be tested and missing things that should have been tested because they did not realize the Chicago area is very different than everywhere else. When I'm testing homes in Wisconsin and Indiana, it's a totally different test. So there are different things to look out for. So like when I did the building biology training, what's been really helpful with that program is there are Zooms where we are constantly talking and interacting with the colleagues. If someone hires someone who wasn't trained by the Building Biology Institute, they really don't have any sort of deeper knowledge bank to tap into because even someone who's tested hundreds or thousands of homes, you're still not going to have seen everything. You're going to have colleagues. I'm hearing stuff. This is happening in California. This is happening in Colorado. And because a lot of my work is phone consult, I can tap into that knowledge. I know what sorts of things to be looking out for, just that I've heard about these different things on the calls. And so that's what's really important. So a lot of people aren't realizing, they just saw something on the internet and they don't even bother to check in what sort of training did this person have. This person's going to come out for X amount of money. They don't realize the depth of the training that is involved. And whereas something like, say, radon, it's a pretty straightforward training. You drop this off, you come back and you pick it up. Even like a home inspection, when people are having a home inspection, they just input all this data spreadsheet and boom, it like pops out a report. And I know for like building biology, if anyone is wanting a written report, we do have to charge extra because it takes 5 or 6 hours to go through and compile and do all of the data because it's a very personalized setup. And I have colleagues who are much more computer literate than I am, and they've tried to figure out ways to automate it so that they can have it, boom, pop out a report, and nobody has been successful in doing that. On the calls, we're like, oh, God, man, leaving the report for 5 hours, 10 hours. And so, yeah, it's just a very unique field.
It sounds, and also we're learning so much as we go with this one. What if we change the EMF frequencies to healing related frequencies that actually help us? Do you think that's possible?
And so I get that question a lot.
You do?
And yeah, I do. And so like for me, when I'm helping people, I'm a numbers person. I'm a big science person with the background with the biochemistry. So I like to measure things on pieces of equipment. And so for a lot of this, so I'm basically just going to the numbers. What recommendations can I give that the numbers will be better? And so I know there are different people out there who are trying to create these different devices. They're saying it will neutralize it or something like that. And they really are not changing the numbers on my meters. So unfortunately, the people are still getting hit by these frequencies. And I've seen some people where they don't really notice anything either way. Some people, they've had adverse effects. It tends to be people who are sensitive. They said they've used some of these different neutralizing devices and that they've felt worse. Their pets got sick. All these different things have happened. And so, yeah, that's not really something that I would recommend. And then in terms of like other sorts of frequencies, again, it's going to really depend on the home because I know there are things out there that can help people. But the problem is, say, and just to give 2 different examples, say you have someone where they like had a sports injury. And then we've all heard of there's different devices that like maybe that can speed up the healing. And so maybe they'll use something and that will work and then that'll be great. But the second case, say you have someone, they have chronic Lyme or they have chronic this or that, and they're just not doing well and they hear about the same device. And they're like, okay, yeah, I'm going to use that device. And then a lot of times those people, they will have an adverse reaction or maybe not even right away, but maybe they'll get cancer or something down the road because they're already overloaded with EMFs. The EMFs in their home are what caused the illness in the first place. And so then adding in more frequencies, even if they can be beneficial to someone else, that is where you're really getting the problem, where people are using these different devices and they're still in the high EMF home. And so for the first line of defense for anyone who's having any health issues, or even for people who are just looking to be proactive, you really want to be testing and lowering the levels in your own home as much as you can. And if you have a simple home, yeah, maybe you can buy 1 or 2 meters and you can figure it out on your own and do stuff. But for me, unfortunately, that didn't work. Like I already didn't have those main different sources. I didn't even have them. I knew that there were some problems in the home I was in. And even though I had the 1 meter, it said it was okay. I bought 3 more. Then I had 4 meters and I knew, and at this point, like I was really going to be needing to do the training because there's just information in the training that just isn't really available out there. And it was a long process because I know a lot of people think, okay, maybe I'll just do the training, then I don't have to hire someone. It takes like hundreds of homes. It takes a long time to really become proficient in this work. And I
Right.
thought the same thing for mold because I did the mold training thinking, oh, then I don't have to hire a mold person. I can't afford a mold person. But the same thing, I could see, oh man, I would really have to have tested lots of homes to really have an in-depth idea. And it's that way
Mhm.
with everything. You can't expect with anything to become proficient overnight.
How are animals affected by EMF? I would think,
They are actually,
yeah, I would think they'd be more sensitive.
yeah, and so it depends on the animal because there's been some sort of old wives' tale, if you will. I don't know if it's true or not that you don't want to sleep where your cat sleeps because cats are really attracted to high EMFs, and I don't really know if that's true. But I have not heard much about cats getting sick in EMFs, but I have heard particularly with dogs. I have had so many clients where the dog is the one that gets sick first. I had one client where there were 3 dogs, 2 of them died, and the third one would not sleep in that same spot. Because the dog knew, right? And then when
Mhm.
I tested, there were very high levels in that one spot. I know I had another client where right after they moved in, the rabbits lost all their fur. Or maybe I can't remember if there was one rabbit or
Wow.
multiple rabbits. Yeah, and so that was a clue. And they were not feeling well, nothing like crazy bad, but that was a clue. Hey, something is wrong here. So yeah,
Right.
with pets, definitely I have seen that. So if someone says one person in the home has this, and then the pet has this, and then it turned out that one person also had a high EMF workplace. I'm like, that makes sense because you had the exposure at work and at home, but the rest of your family didn't. So they're still doing okay. But then your pet is more sensitive. So
Mhm.
that's why they're sick. And I go through and like kind of piece it out that way.
Mhm. So, what are the grounding mats and what ones work? There's so many products out there saying get this to block EMFs. What do you recommend? Because I feel like a lot of it's scams and I've fallen for them.
Yeah, and I think so. A lot of these people who invented products, they just did it with the best of intentions. They were really trying to figure out how can we help people. But I think as time has gone on, things have changed. Like I know, so grounding is great. To be grounding barefoot on the grass is really a good thing, assuming unless you're not by a substation or some big power line. There's little caveats, but like most of the time when I go ground somewhere, I do feel very good. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, in Chicago or on the East Coast, obviously you can't be walking around barefoot all the time, but you can get grounding shoes and do that. I just wouldn't recommend it using them for everyday use. You don't want to be like slipping on your ass in the grocery store parking lot or at the gas station. And trust me, I'm just telling this from experience. It didn't fully happen, but the shoes could be very slippery. And then also, there are times you don't want to be grounded. If there's different, unless your home is 100% electrically clean, there's going to be currents on your floor. So you actually want to
Mm.
be insulated from the floor.
Mhm.
And then if you are walking around on city streets, especially in New York City, how many times have we heard of a pet dying because an electrified manhole
I
cover, it stepped
know.
on it. Right, and in Chicago that's happened too. So you only want to wear these grounding shoes or your bare feet if you are on grass or sand or gravel or something like that.
Mhm.
And yeah, the grounding mat, unfortunately, it's not the same electrically. If we were in Europe, then you basically have all of the current going to the home on the hot and coming back on the neutral. But
Mhm.
here in the U.S., like 70% plus is returning back on the through the ground. And so if you're plugging a mat into the ground or into your electrical the basically the hot of your I'm sorry the ground of your electrical which is connected to the ground, it's really not the same thing. It would take a long time to go into the different reasons why, but again, I always tell people just listen with your body. And so if someone a lot of people when they're getting these products 50% of the time they don't notice anything either way, and people who are sensitive are getting worse right away. So that's my concern. If someone's not sensitive, they're not noticing something, they're thinking it's helping, and it's actually could be making them worse. Because with a lot of these different products, and I know we've touched on the harmonizers where it's not changing the readings in the meters, but a lot of these other products that are out there, and there's a number of different things that plug into the wall or whatever,
Mhm.
the levels will be going down on one meter, but then they will actually go up on other meters. And so the one meter that they go down on is actually the cheaper $100 meter that someone can test with. But on my $800 or $2,000 meters or whatever, other levels are going up. And most people they really aren't aware of this. Because I was sensitive, a lot of these products I purchased and I felt worse right away, and I didn't know why. When you look on the internet, there's no mention of anything. And now I think if people Google around, you will see more people having different bad experiences with different products. And so some of these things, like I know with the grounding mat, if someone is feeling better, usually there is some that sort of thing, that type of field that's decreasing. There's something simple that can be done in your home. So
Mhm.
then you don't have to worry, gosh, are these other fields getting worse? And if someone anyone is feeling worse from any of these products, that actually is a big sign that there is a big problem in the home. It's kind of like it is with supplements too. The people who are already in the best health are most likely to be helped by supplements or by whatever other thing they're doing. And the people who are in the worst homes or in the worst health, they're more likely to experience these adverse effects. So if anyone out there is buying a product and like just really pay attention, hey, am I going downhill? Because I actually had a list of different products that I didn't recommend, and I was at a health fair, and so I had the list sitting there, and this woman looks at it and she's, oh no, because I actually have such and such product. And I was like, oh, you do? I was like, and so how often do you use it? And she said she was sleeping on this sort of, it wasn't a brownie mat, it was a different type of mat. There's a whole bunch of different mats. And I said to her, and how long have you been doing that? And she said 5 years. And I said, so how is your health now compared to 5 years ago? And she just looked at me and she's, oh my God. And so it was worse. When that had happened with me too, with one of these products, I immediately felt worse right away. It was like no question. But another one, I had felt better. And then like over time, I was actually getting worse and I didn't put it together. And then by that point, I had more advanced meters and I was able to figure out. So that's what can be tough too, as well, is that a lot of these things, and especially when people are promoting products on the internet, they'll just show the tri-field showing that it's okay for the quote unquote low EMF sauna. Hey, look, the tri-field shows it's okay. Or for some of these pendants, they'll show this one reading. On that one reading, it'll change if your hand goes in the way. Whereas for the low EMF saunas, the one reading that changes, it'll just be, they'll just be testing magnetic, and then the electric field function isn't sensitive enough on the tri-field to pick it up. And most of the people selling these products, they aren't aware of these problems. So I don't think they're doing this intentionally. They just don't, they really haven't had the training of all the building biology training. They don't own 20 professional meters, so they're not able to check. They just see that it's lower on their tri-field meters, so they think that's okay.
Oh, that works.
And then I think, a lot of people really, are they going to hire someone to test all these things? I have had clients who have done that. I don't want to know about my home. Just come over and test all my products. And they're surprised to find that. And luckily, a lot of people, if they just brought the products in the last 30 days, they can turn around, they can get all their money back. And the cost of my visit is going to be always way less than all what people have spent on these products. And I think our society, we've moved toward this thing of like, gratification of buying. We want to buy. We don't want to pay for advice. We want to buy. And so people will be, oh, I don't want to pay this one for 3 hours of advice. But then they come back, the same people. This happens all the time, and ask me about a product that's way more than the price that I quoted them. And I'm thinking, like, really? And of course, the product itself is not even going to help. But I just, So,
right. I know.
So that's something, where people are like, oh, it's the economy. No, it's not. People are still spending tons of money on home rehab. People are still buying products. People are unloading here in Chicago, $600 an hour to see different doctors, $8,000 for this doctor's opinion. But so it's not, of course, there are people who really don't have the money, but most people are spending and they're not seeing the connection that how much money have you spent on products? How much money have you spent on supplements and on doctors over the last 5 years? And what if you could do something, just a one-time test to figure out, hey, let's get things down. And then it's more manageable. Then maybe some of your symptoms have gone away. Then there's only, 1 or 2 symptoms left. And then you could see the doctor and then get more of an opinion. But right now, most people, they're going to the doctor and they got so many symptoms. And it's like they're being prescribed supplements to chase their tail. Like, okay, you got to do this for adrenal and this for gut microbiome and this for thyroid. And you don't even know what's causing what.
Right. It's exhausting. And everyone's doing it.
Yeah.
And all the supplements, that's a whole nother industry that's been so overdone and exhausted.
I started having adverse reactions to supplements, but even before that, they were not helping me. I think with a lot of people, what I'm saying is really look through what supplements you're taking. What are you noticing? Do you feel, because if you feel something, great, but a lot of people, they're taking it thinking it's preventing some unknown future ill, or that is somehow like keeping them from getting worse, or they're really not holding it to this higher standard that we hold things to. Hey, like what sorts of results are we getting? I know a lot of people call me, what results am I going to see?
Bad are electric cars. Are we sitting on a ticking time bomb?
If someone just wants one to like tool around town in, and they're like going to show up at a party, and that's like probably not the biggest concern. But if someone's sitting in an electric car for an 8-hour shift of cars in general have high EMFs, even gas powered cars. It's just
Mm-hmm.
different types of EMFs. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, but I know a lot of people have reported feeling worse in the electric cars. So again, it really is going to depend. With the gas powered cars, the magnetic fields are going to be higher because
Mm-hmm.
some of the electric cars are shielded. But then with some of these cars, you cannot turn off the transmitters. And so I've heard of people, they couldn't park the car near their home or
Yeah.
different things like that. And so, yeah, that's something where, that can be a problem. Like, because I've heard of people who really weren't sensitive that became sensitive when they had a car. And I personally
Mm-hmm.
haven't had one, so I haven't had that experience. But I know even some of my colleagues have told me when they have gone out with clients on a test drive that they didn't feel well in the car.
Oh,
And
wow.
so,
Just in a tub.
yeah, because and these might have been colleagues that were more sensitive, and yeah, that's definitely something to take into account. But
Mm-hmm.
so for clients, that's another service I've offered where I've met people at the dealer, or people have like gotten a car and I've tested it with a lot of different meters. Because again, that's something that Tri-Field's not going to pick up a
Wow.
lot on a different car. And most people aren't that sensitive. And even me, even though I'm sensitive, I know whenever I've gone somewhere to rent a car, I actually am not even putting it in that top level. When I'm picking of those 4 cars at the airport, my first
Mm-hmm.
thing is, does it smell? Because
Right.
I'm not going to be able to drive around if I got a headache from whatever they sprayed in it or if it's
Right.
new. And then the second thing is the seat comfortable. I don't care how low the EMFs are because my back's going to hurt if I can't get a comfortable seat.
Right.
So I've actually then picked out a car with higher EMFs because it's only a week, right? And I'm
Right.
not driving crazy drives. But yeah, when you're investing in a car to purchase, unfortunately, what's going to be happening with the newer cars is that you're not going to be able to turn these different antennas off.
Mm-hmm.
So now sometimes you could still do it, but they all have so many different things. But again, I've seen this happen where people are like, oh, I can't afford an EMF consult, but my $30,000 car that my parents bought me is making me sick. Okay, maybe it's because you're in a high EMF home and you're reacting to it. I've literally
Right.
had that happen.
Right.
So yeah, so the car, it's not as important as the home. The home is the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when people are looking for cars, that is definitely something you want to take into consideration, which cars have the lowest EMFs and what you're more sensitive to. And so most people now do have a lot of radio frequency in their life. They're going to be more
Mm-hmm.
sensitive to that. So if they buy a car where you aren't able to turn things off, then that could be a problem.
So you buy an old classic.
Right, exactly. There is some place down in southern Illinois, I believe it might be the only place in the country, I think, where they have all these cars that they've rehabbed. Because actually the lowest EMF car of all is the pre-1986 Mercedes, the diesel Mercedes. There's no
Really?
electricity at all. Yeah, so if you can get someone, like some special mechanic, to overhaul the whole thing so that it works, that's the lowest EMF. But in
Oh,
terms
wow.
of the age, definitely, yeah. So I have a van that's about 20 years old.
Thank you so much. This is a wealth of information, and I've learned so much today. How can people get in touch with you to use your services or learn more?
Okay, if people want to learn more about my services, it is on my website, which is my name, MIEKEJACOBS.com. And then my phone number is 847-769-5135 if people want to reach out. In terms of my services, for anyone who is within 3 hours of the Chicago area, I offer in-person testing. And then nationwide, I offer different types of virtual consults. I know a lot of people really, especially if someone's living in a remote area, there's not going to be an EMF consultant near them. Most people don't have the $5,000 or $10,000 to have someone fly out with all their equipment and everything. And so I do offer virtual consults, and where I send like an extensive questionnaire, and then I give instructions for like maybe a meter or two to buy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do that. And that's something that, especially since I've been in the field almost 10 years, that you really want to have someone doing that who has been around long enough, because you really have to have been testing a lot of in-person homes to get a feel to be able to assess a home remotely. Mm-hmm. And then also I give advice for people who are building a new home and for people who are, as I mentioned before, looking to purchase a new home.
Mm-hmm.
And then just people who have general questions about health. Like a lot of people before the lockdown, I really did not do much virtual consult, but now people are so used to just picking up a phone and calling, and they've already been paying like all these crazy prices for all these different medical opinions. And I work not only with EMFs, but I look more at the holistic picture of the whole lifestyle. I've got a Facebook page and I've got a LinkedIn profile. So I got a couple other places people can reach out to me.
And that's Healthy House Chicago, correct?
Yes. And then so my email address is actually, it's my name, the MIEKEJACOBS @hushmail.com. And so people can reach out by email as well. There is a spot on my website where you can send something. And then if someone doesn't hear back from me, maybe try a second way. A lot of times I have issues getting different, like sometimes my email doesn't work. I don't know. It's crazy. Yeah, very responsive and just looking forward to hearing from anyone who's looking for more help.
Yeah, you're amazing, and no doubt that you're here to help save the world with all this information. Thank you so much. Please find a comfortable position and take a deep breath in and a long breath out. And just notice how you feel. I think the biggest issue with any health problems is just being aware of what makes you feel better, what makes you feel worse, and trusting your body to let you know when something's good or bad for you. So just right now, thank your body for making you aware of what is good or bad for you. And take a deep breath in. Inhale all the beautiful energy all around you. And exhale, letting go of any toxic energy, any stress, worry. Let it all leave the body. And notice that if we're focused on problems, that we'll have more problems. And see if you can direct your focus right now to peace, joy, that feeling of excitement. Maybe if you're working on a project, you can bring the emotion of excitement around it and watch it take off. Now, just slowly start to relax the muscles in the face. Unclench your teeth. Relax your jaw. Soften the eyes. Your lips might part, and just let the breath start to slow down. As you relax your neck and shoulders, the whole body starts to feel loose and heavy. And just feel that peaceful, calm energy coursing through your body. Let the arms feel loose and heavy, and the legs feel loose and heavy. Try to imagine a beautiful place where you feel completely comfortable, healthy, relaxed. And imagine a source of water in this space. Maybe it's a waterfall or a lake, the ocean. Be aware that we choose our thoughts. The subconscious mind will choose thoughts and emotions to protect you, even though they might hurt you. So try to redirect your attention to positive thoughts that will always help you. Neutral thoughts. Just refocus your thoughts on where you want your life to go. Anytime you have a negative thought, I want you to completely transition, refocus on the exact opposite thought. And notice how it empowers you. It heals you. It shifts your energy completely. Now allow your upper back and your lower back to soften and relax. And imagine all the EMF currents leaving your body. You are not affected by anything negative. Let your legs feel loose and heavy. And imagine all the toxins leaving your body. Every day, we're exposed to different toxic energies and toxins in the environment, in our food. And just take this moment to allow it to release. Thanks for joining us today. Namaste.